all began when I decided to buy myself a 3D printer. Something affordable, simple enough for a beginner, yet still capable enough for more serious, professional level use. Before making the purchase, I spent quite a bit of time reading forums and talking to people who were already using 3D printers for their hobbies. When I mentioned that I wanted to avoid anything overly complicated, and especially didn't want to deal with chemicals at home because of the children, and also because space is a bit limited, the recommendations kept pointing very firmly in one direction: the filament-based BambuLab A1Mini. And that's eventually the machine that found its way into my home. Before going any further, I should probably mention that this is not a sponsored video. BambuLab are not paying me anything to promote their products. This video is simply my own personal project, where I want to show how a relatively simple and affordable filament printer can be used for scale models and figure hobby projects. At the end of the day, everyone will find their own preferred tools and favorite machines, but through this video you'll at least be able to see what this particular printer is capable of. Looking back now, I can honestly say that I haven't regretted buying this machine for even a moment. For a beginner, getting it set up and running is incredibly easy, and the maintenance is just as straightforward. The only real complaint I've heard came from my wife, asking, "Why did you buy such a small one?" But for my own hobby needs, it has turned out to be an extremely practical and convenient machine. And as time goes on, it keeps surprising me with what it's actually capable of. In the end, the price to performance ratio feels absolutely spot on to me. At the time, I paid around €203 for it, and honestly, I still find myself thinking, I got a machine like this for that kind of money. The BambuLab A1Mini is a compact filament-based 3D printer designed to be beginner-friendly, while still offering features normally found on far more expensive machines. It includes automatic calibration systems, high print speeds, easy maintenance, and surprisingly detailed print quality straight out of the box. When it launched, it quickly stood out because it made modern, fast, and reliable 3D printing affordable for ordinary hobby users. Many people saw it as one of the first budget printers that felt less like a machine you constantly needed to fix, and more like an appliance you could simply switch on and use. Another thing that really impressed me is how user-friendly the whole software ecosystem is around BambuLab. They have their own online platform where users can both upload and download all kinds of designs and creations across almost every theme imaginable. There are design competitions, community forums, mobile apps, creative tools, and easy access to new models and ideas. Whether you're using a phone or a computer, the whole experience feels smooth and convenient, making it surprisingly easy to simply print your ideas and bring your imagination to life. At this point, I was printing my very first kit card style scale model design, the AT Street from Star Wars. When the print finished, I remember just turning the frame around in my hands, thinking to myself, did I really make this in my own home? Later in the video, you'll see how I took this simple print further by adding my own traditional model building skills, eventually turning it into a fully detailed science fiction diorama. And it's also worth mentioning that the Maker Lab platform contains an enormous amount of science fiction and fantasy-themed content. Designs are uploaded by creators themselves, and the system is built around licensed sharing and creator ownership, meaning designers can publish, share, sell, or protect their own work while users can safely download models through the platform's ecosystem. At first, I only had the standard 0.4 nozzle that came with the printer, so naturally I started experimenting to see what it was actually capable of. I also wanted to try printing figures, which is how this dinosaur egg model came to life. At the same time, I was curious to see how the plastic would behave when sanded and painted like a traditional scale model. This grey material was just standard PLA filament, slightly rubbery in feel, but it could definitely be sanded. The real question is simply how much patience you have for sanding and polishing. The acrylic paints from Vallejo, especially the Vallejo model color range, also adhered to it very nicely, so at that point the future already looked quite promising. It became clear that I simply needed to experiment with different filaments, and eventually, probably move to a finer 0.2 nozzle as well. To be completely honest, one of my first bigger projects for testing the printer, and also practicing different techniques, was actually customizing the printer itself. Maker World is absolutely full of different gadgets, accessories, containers, tools, and decorative parts. Some are practical, others, perhaps a little less practical, but everyone will definitely find something there that suits their own taste. So naturally, I started putting together my own version of the machine, combining different elements in a way that felt right to me visually and functionally. This goblin from Kingdom Clash was one of the first prints that I decided to fully finish properly from start to finish, using all the traditional modeling and painting techniques that I already knew. The children also started placing their own requests. One wanted a Pikachu, while the other chose a unicorn, and together we got to paint them as a fun little family project. Of course, not everything went smoothly from the very beginning. I had to learn how the materials behaved, understand the printer's speed and limitations, and gradually get a feel for what it was truly capable of. Over time, I started realizing that it's also important to look inside the design itself and adjust settings manually in Bambu Studio. So yes, once you really dive into the hobby, you quickly discover that it isn't completely effortless after all. That's also when failed and unfinished prints started appearing. And little by little, I learned that you really do need to read the model descriptions carefully and recognize whether a particular design is actually printable on your own machine in the first place. For example, this drone simply wasn't possible to print properly. The design itself was too broken and poorly prepared. But in hindsight, I probably could have realized that much earlier just by reading the feedback and comments from other users first. One of the most practical printing projects I ended up doing was creating drawer organizers for my hobby tools and supplies. It was definitely a long process, but in the end I built a full Gridfinity setup for my drawers. The nice thing about the system is that it's completely modular, so over time I can rearrange and adapt everything depending on how my tools and hobby equipment change. After a while, birthdays and visits became much easier as well, because I no longer had to spend time searching shops for gifts or something to bring along. Instead, knowing the person or the kind of humor they would appreciate, I could browse Make a World for a suitable design, print it, and then finish and paint it using my own modeling skills to create something genuinely personal and unique. For example, this particular print was made as a gift for friends with a military background, a humorous beer bottle cap designed to keep your drink from going flat while relaxing in the sauna. Christmas also became a lot more interesting thanks to the printer. My wife started printing decorations for the home, and when it came to gifts, which can honestly become quite a headache during the holidays, the printer helped us create things that felt far more personal and unique. Instead of buying something generic, it became possible to make gifts based around the exact themes and characters that the person genuinely loves. The possibilities are honestly endless. These, for example, are custom dioramas I made for my older children, inspired by Chainsaw Man and Godzilla. First I found and printed the characters themselves, while at the same time planning out small scenes and ideas around them. After that, I used my traditional modeling skills together with scratch-built materials and extra details to construct the final dioramas piece by piece. The children certainly seemed very excited about gifts like these. My next idea was to create a birthday present for a friend, and that idea actually came from browsing around Make a World and discovering that there's also a separate section where you can create completely custom designs from scratch. For example, you can even generate models from photographs. So I decided to experiment with it. I found an old photograph of my friend, and I do mean old and fairly low quality, but it was the best one I had available. I uploaded it into BambuLab, generated the model, and honestly, the result completely surprised me. At first I thought, surely it can't really be this simple. I expected a complicated process before printing, but in reality it worked almost exactly like that. I imported the model into the Bambu software, adjusted the scale, and printed it. I specifically wanted the figure in 1/35 scale, because years ago I had already built my friend a tiger eye tank model in the same scale, where I had added a small paper photo of him. But now, instead of a flat photograph, I could place an actual miniature figure beside it. The next project was printing additional details for one of my own dioramas. In this case, extra parts for the bunker facade of a Saab 37 Viggen display. printing one friend as a miniature figure immediately made me want to experiment even further. I started thinking, alright, 1/35th scale worked, but what if I tried 1/72nd, my favorite scale, using a better quality photo? Another friend's birthday was coming up, so I decided to make miniature figures of both him and myself. And somehow, unbelievably, the Filament printer actually managed it. Using the 0.2 nozzle together with Polymaker Cosplar filament, which has a very fine texture and a slightly more brittle feel similar to traditional model plastic, the results became surprisingly detailed for such a small scale. Then came the familiar part again, adding a bit of my own modeling and painting work, and suddenly these tiny printed figures turned into a very personal addition to a diorama built around a BMD-1 vehicle, a scene I titled Time Heals Memories. And as if that still wasn't enough, I started wondering, could it go even smaller? What about 1/700th scale? I had an aircraft carrier restoration project that needed additional details and replacement aircraft, so naturally I thought, alright then, let's try it. And honestly, the results already look surprisingly convincing. The project itself is still unfinished and will properly return in the future, but this tiny printed airwing already feels completely workable and usable to me. With a bit of finishing and painting, I genuinely think these miniature aircraft could end up looking even better than the original planes that came with the carrier model kit itself. Here's also a small example of a custom request I helped with along the way. A friend had lost the main landing gear wheel from his Illusion EL2 model, and I was able to print a replacement part for him. At one point, I also started developing the idea of creating my own non-profit organization, with the goal of introducing people to this hobby and encouraging them to try it for themselves. For that, I discovered simple printable card kit style models that could be used in small workshops, where people could assemble and build them with guidance, even if they had never tried model making before. As an introductory project, I chose a Supermarine Spitfire model. It felt simple enough for beginners, but still elegant and satisfying to build, something that could leave people with a genuinely positive first experience. I experimented with printing different aircraft and various model types to see how practical they would be for workshops. Some turned out to be too time-consuming or overly complicated, while others simply required far too much printing time to be practical for group activities. I painted one of the Supermarine Spitfire models using my own modeling techniques, and honestly, it turned out to be a really pleasant little project, simple, relaxing, and satisfying to build. I could easily imagine it being enjoyable even for someone who had never built a model before. And the variety of kit card designs available was surprisingly large. I found buildable ponies and animals, motorcycles, and all sorts of other subjects as well. Not every model has to be military themed. There are plenty of fun and creative options for completely different interests and hobbies too. Another birthday project involved creating a replica sword from Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba. Later came another gift project inspired by Pirates of the Caribbean, a replica of the Cursed Incan coin from the films. With that one, I even started experimenting with ways to make the prop feel realistic in the hand. I printed both sides of the coin separately, glued them onto a large steel construction washer, and then painted the whole piece. The result actually had the proper weight and feel of a real coin, which made it surprisingly convincing. Then another custom printing request arrived, giving me a chance to experiment even further with printing different types of human figures and character models. This is where the project continued that had originally left me completely amazed after my very first print, the AT Street from Star Wars. To make the model feel even more realistic, I used another card kit design as a kind of donor kit, borrowing additional inner leg details and material for the underside structure. Aside from that, the original design itself was already surprisingly well made. Of course, I still couldn't resist adding some of my own scratch-built details and modifications along the way. To present the finished model properly, I found a sci-fi themed display base on Maker World, then resized and adjusted it in the Bambu software to fit the scene exactly the way I wanted. After painting and weathering all the parts, I ended up with what is essentially an almost entirely 3D printed display model, one that I genuinely wouldn't be embarrassed to place on an exhibition table. And finally, a project that still isn't fully finished yet, but one that absolutely amazed me the most so far. In short, I draw something from my imagination, upload the image into the BambuLab app, let it generate a 3D model from it, download the file, adjust a few things here and there, and then print it out, eventually holding a physical version of my own drawing in my hands. That feeling is honestly difficult to describe. The possibilities this opens up feel incredible. This small and relatively affordable machine has surprised me again and again. For a beginner who simply wants to experiment and create, it genuinely feels like one of the best entry points you could ask for. The printer arrives almost ready to use. You remove a few transport screws and packing parts, plug it in, connect it to the ecosystem, and you're basically ready to start printing. For me personally, the compact size is actually perfect, because it fits comfortably onto my rather limited workspace. Of course, if you want to print objects larger than around 20 centimeters, then you'll probably want to look at larger machines. But for my small-scale modeling projects, this printer has worked beautifully. So yes, I can absolutely recommend it. And with that, I wish everyone happy experimenting, enjoyable model building mojo, and plenty of creative inspiration. Stay healthy, stay positive, and keep creating.